Psalm 23, that's Old Testament, right? Let's see. Towards the front of the Bible. I don't know if you can tell, but I got my hair cut this last week. I'm one of those guys who I just don't think about it until one day I look in the mirror and I'm like, oh man, that is shaggy. And I mentioned it to Jen just casually, like maybe she was impartial. I was like, hon, I think I need to get my hair cut, and without like missing a beat, she goes, oh yeah, definitely, you need to get that cut. So I went into a local barber shop, and I'm sitting in the chair, and I'm talking to this lady, and Pastor Craig Everett, he calls this, what's he called this? Strategic consumerism. It's where, as Christians, you pick the same place to sort of shop, the same bank teller to go to, the same barber chair to sit in. And in doing that, you get to know people, right? You can actually tell them about yourself, and they get to know you on a first name basis, and vice versa. So I'm trying to be more deliberate about that. So anyways, I go to this place locally, and I'm sitting in the chair, and I'm talking to the woman, and I could tell she wasn't having a great day. When you ask somebody, you're like, how's it going? And they say, oh, it's going. That's usually not a good thing, even though it's better than the alternative. But I'm like, okay, so we're just going to kind of be chill. But nonetheless, I can't help myself. I just probe a little bit. I'm like, so how do you feel about the snow? Are you excited for more, or are you done with it? And you could tell right away. She said, I can't be done with it soon enough. And she said, matter of fact, I'm going to Jamaica in a couple of weeks. I said, oh, that's cool. And I'm always trying to figure out like what's a bridge to like sort of spiritual conversation. I said, a woman who used to go to my church has since moved away. She's from Jamaica, and she speaks, passionately about Jamaica as a country. And this woman, cutting my hair, said, yeah, apparently it's not always a safe place, but we're going to be staying at a resort while we're there. And I said, oh, that's cool. And where's the resort? And she said, we're going to Montego Bay. I said, oh, that sounds familiar to me. And then she said something that really stood out to me about her trip in a few weeks to Montego Bay in Jamaica. She said there's all kinds of restaurants, there's all kinds of nightclubs, there's endless food and drink. We'll have everything we need. It's all right there. And I knew what she meant when she said, we have everything we need. But it also stood out to me, like, that's a very American way of looking at something. It's like this RV, it's got everything we need in it right here. This house, this community, this town, it's got everything that we need, right? This insurance bundle, this retirement package, it's got everything we need right here. In other words, we don't need anything else. In Psalm 23, David says, the Lord is my shepherd. I lack nothing. In that, as we looked at it last week, there's a statement there saying, I have everything I need. It's all right here. Do you think that there's any connection between what King David was saying long ago and far away in this psalm and what this barber was telling me, where she says, it's all right there? Do you think David could picture in his mind saying that he's at some tiki bar in the Caribbean, toes dangling in the sand, hot plantains being served up, slightly too hot, almost ready to eat, offshore breeze coming in, suntan lotion in the air? Do you think that's what he meant when he said, I've got everything I need right now? Probably not. Definitely not. Matter of fact, in just a few verses, he's about to say, though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil. And David had problems. David had things that he was up against. Life wasn't always peachy. I'm sure there were some situations where he was like, you know what, I wish there was something else here. But nonetheless, he could say with full conviction and in a timeless sense that he lacks nothing. A little different than my barber saying it's all right there. That all-inclusive cruise ship mentality. So if that's not exactly what David meant when he said, I have everything, What exactly did he mean? So as we move down to our verse for today, verse 2 and part of verse 3, it really reads as a commentary. Broad statement, Yahweh is my shepherd, therefore I have everything I need. All right, well, let's unpack that a little bit. He makes me lie down in green pastures. Green pastures, they're lush. First of all, who are we talking about when we talk about he? Who's he? Last week, the Lord. Behind that name, the Lord, is the personal name Yahweh. Yahweh is a God who reveals himself. When you're on a first name basis with the creator of the universe, you know him as Yahweh. So remember, David's talking about the Lord, and it's the Lord who makes me lie down in green pastures. In this verse here, we have some beautiful imagery. It's one of the things that makes Psalm 23 pop, is the imagery of the psalm. And what do we see here? Well, the first thing that stands out to me is green pastures. He makes me lie down in green pastures. Pastures is symbolic of food. Shepherds and shepherdesses, they'd have their sheep graze. They'd be out in the field getting their nourishment. The Lord cares that we are fed, that we have basic needs that are met. And beyond just the idea of pastures, are green pastures. Green means lush. The provision is not simply sterile, dried rice with seasoning, though there are seasons of life where that's exactly what we have. But God desires that his people have more than just food and sustenance. He wants us to taste his goodness. When we look at green pastures, not only is it a food source, but it's God's goodness. Green means lush. Lush means good. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He cares that there's food, and he cares that the food is good. There's something else in this imagery of green pastures, though. It's an imagery of contrast. Think about where David was a shepherd. Was he in the hills of Vermont? Northern Scotland? Just rolling green pasture after green pasture, just rolling hills of nothing but lushness. No, in contrast to what? The arid desert. Think about where David was as a shepherd in Palestine, a part of the world that knew green pastures, but also knew desert, dryness. So as we hear this, we hear not just a sense of abundance, but also a sense of contrast. The word oasis comes to mind. Do you associate that word with the Lord? God provides oasis, a nice contrast. Whether it's to the desert around, or it's also, as one green pasture is depleted, he moves them to the next. The Lord is my shepherd, I lack nothing. He makes me lie down in green pastures. Look at how the Lord provides for his people, not just food, but also he wants us to taste that he is good. And that goodness quite often is a contrast to the world that we live in. Right? It acts as an oasis. Food is good, but food and drink is better. Continuing, he says, he leads me beside quiet waters. That imagery of quiet. I'm getting ahead of myself. What is David doing in that field? We're going back. What is David doing there? He's lying down. There's an imagery of rest. As the Lord makes me to what? Lie down in green pastures. Lying down is he's stopped. Not only does the Lord lead us through green pastures, he leads us to green pastures. And that lying down is a sense of stopping for a minute. And taking it all in. Getting some rest. It's not just physical, it's not just sustenance where we need nourishment, but we also need to stop, to pause, to rest for a moment. I have an image of a dog in my mind. I can't remember if it was my parents' dog or if it was one of my friends, but on a routine basis, either my parents or my friends' parents would come, they'd fill up this kibble dish, and the dog would come in and would full on just sprawl out and wrap its arms around the bowl, kind of like this, so that the chin would just strategically land right on the edge of the bowl. And I remember laughing at the dog, thinking, that is hilarious. That dog is so lazy. It just lays down to eat its food, because traditionally a dog would walk up and put its head down and while standing eat its food, but this dog would actually lay down and take it all in. And now I'm starting to think the dog might be smarter than I realize, that I could take a lesson from that dog. I don't know about you, but often I'm usually eating on the run as I'm trying to get somewhere else or trying to get something else done. I have an image of my grandfather. Last week I mentioned my maternal grandmother. This week I'll mention my maternal grandfather, Bubba. And I remember distinctly sitting at his dining room table and him saying, chew your food. Slow down and chew your food. Back then I was like, that sounds like wise counsel. Now I hear it and I'm like, that sounds like godly counsel. The Lord cares about the details of our lives, right? It's food, it's lush, it's the goodness of the Lord. It makes me lie down, to pause for a moment, to take it in, to smell the roses, as it were. Something I'm not particularly good at doing. And how did David get there? How did he arrive wherever he was? This image that he has in his mind, this grand metaphor for his life. He makes me lie down. David didn't end up there on his own. You see, we as a people, we have free will, but God is also sovereign, and he exercises that sovereignty in our lives. And sometimes when the Lord knows he needs to be assertive, that we find rest and nourishment, he engages. One of the resources that I've been using for this series on the Psalms was written by Haddon Robinson. Perhaps a familiar name, of this famous preaching professor. He was at Gordon Conwell just as I was leaving. He was there in a Dallas seminary, Denver seminary. You probably heard him on Discovering the Word on Christian radio. Anyways, he's just a wordsmith and so great with imagery. And this is his book called The Good Shepherd, Reflections on Psalm 23. And with this in mind, this idea that God inserts himself and is assertive at times, he writes, often sheep, like people, do not know when to rest. At times when a flock should be resting in preparation for a difficult trek before them, something will excite them. Perhaps it will be the growl of a mountain lion or the bark of a dog or merely the shout of a child. Yet this can bother the sheep and drive them to running back and forth across the pasture. The wise shepherd knows that the sheep have need of rest. Therefore, he will move into the midst of the flock, and catching a sheep, he will gently force it to lie down and feed quietly on the cool green grass. He makes his sheep lie down in green pastures. I try not to over-spiritualize the mundane in my life, but there have been a number of times where I've gotten sick, really too sick to function. I'm not even reading at that point. I'm just laid out on the couch with a bad flu or really bad cold. And more than once in the midst of that, I've thought, Lord, when you want me to rest, you make it known. The Lord cares, not just about the food, the physical well-being, the nourishment there, but also just the physical depletion that a sheep experience. God cares about that in our lives. Food is good, food and drink is better. He leads me beside quiet waters. And here when we see this part of the verse, rest appears. Another version of rest. He leads me beside quiet waters. Are the waters raging? Is there a current? Is David somewhere under a celestial waterfall? No. These are quiet waters. Here, as we're getting a sense of provision, we're also getting that sense of rest. God provides not just the food that we eat, but also the water that we drink. He cares about the whole sheep, sustenance as well as hydration. And then that quiet water, we have the image of rest, as we should. But there's also something a little deeper here when we think about quiet waters. There's another kind of care that's at hand. I'm a total novice on this subject, but I'm learning that sheep are pretty timid around moving water. If there's a bit of a current, the water's moving too much, they hesitate to engage. Shepherds and shepherdesses were known to take their sheep and find a pool of water that was still, where the animals could come up and without being scared off, they could drink. And if those pools just weren't naturally forming, a shepherd would take a tool and cut a trench into the earth and divert the water and create his or her own pool for the sheep. It's an interesting visual, but think about how the shepherd knows his sheep and cares for them. Knows them and cares for them on that level. They're more than just a number, they're more than just animals. He knows them personally. There's a sense of not just physical care, but also emotional care. That inner being. He gets them on that level. Does the Lord know us like that? Do you ever have moments in your walk with the Lord when you think, only God could do that? Only God could know that about me. Only God could provide that situation or that experience, or that I'd hear that at just the right time. When we have those moments, it strengthens our faith. And yes, the Lord does care about us deeply, physically, emotionally, and also in our core, our depths. David then writes, he refreshes my soul. God is in the business of renewal. God is in the business of restoring, rejuvenating. The word that David uses here behind refresh is the Hebrew word shuv. He shuvs me. To shuv means to turn back, to return. If you're walking in this direction and then you pivot 180, that's a shuv. If you leave your house on an evening walk some night and you're headed directly away from your home and at some point you decide it's time to turn back, you do that 180 pivot and you make your way back home, that's shuv. Here, it's the Lord who causes shuv in our lives. He restores my soul to bring back. And soul here, soul in the Bible, it can mean spiritual, it can mean our inner being, it can mean our lives in general. The Lord restores us, big picture, but also on a spiritual level. Our inner person. It's at the core of the gospel. A God who brings us back, who redeems us, restores us in the person of Jesus Christ. It's not just our electronic devices that have a refresh button. About once a day when I'm sitting at my computer or I'm flipping through my phone, I'll go to my Google Calendar and I'll just hit refresh, just naturally. Because chances are, in shutting my computer off or turning my phone off and then turning it back on, something's been left out. A number of things just aren't functioning properly on that app. And I've learned that if I hit refresh, within seconds, it just brings it right back. It's accurate. It's clear. It's as it should be. It's been restored. It's functioning. David acknowledges that this is what the Lord does with us. He refreshes our soul, our person. This is our walk with him. The Lord is my shepherd, I lack nothing. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He refreshes my soul. He guides me along the right paths for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil, for you are with me, your rod and your staff. They comfort me. The imagery all by itself brings a sense of calm, even without the theological reflections that are there. I think that's one of the reasons why this psalm has been so beautiful and considered so beautiful and appreciated by so many for so long. Because even in the secular world, we can be captivated by this imagery. It puts us at peace. It settles our hearts. In our household, one of the most popular TV shows that we like to watch, matter of fact, it's without debate, it's our favorite television show, is All Creatures Great and Small. Airs on PBS Sunday nights. It's a period piece. It brings us back to the 1930s, just before the eruption of World War II. And as you can imagine, it brings us into, it's based on Yorkshire, England, is that right? Do I have that right? Brings us out into the countryside, and the main context is this veterinarian clinic in the town of Yorkshire. And we love the characters. We love the cast. We love the storyline. We love all the interactions with the animals. But without question, and every single week we make mention of it, is just how beautiful the landscape is. The imagery, and even this cartoonish sort of, these are shots from the intro as the opening credits start to roll. And there's some beautiful music in the background, and without question they do this deliberately to just kind of give you a pleasant experience before the show has even started. Here's another image. And we mention every week that, it just feels so nice to turn this on. We wish we could stream this every single day. And as they're going out to take care of cows or sheep or horses, to see the shots of them out in the hillside and the stone walls and the old dirt roads and so on, it's just beautiful. This is an imagery that God is using here to deliver some deep theological truths about who he is and who we are. And God could just tell us, kind of like an Apostle Paul at times, where he's very direct about theology, who God is and who we are. But with this psalm, God chooses this kind of language, these kinds of portraits of the mind to deliver his word. Because he knows that we as his sheep want to feel safe, comforted, cared for. Notice, he knows that his people need these moments in a psalm like this with an imagery that just simply puts us at ease. The Lord, who is our shepherd, who makes us lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He refreshes my soul. Food, drink, our core, mind, body, and soul. The progression, I think, is more logical than it might appear as you think, or it might seem as you think through just sort of the food and the drink. He refreshes my soul. It's hard to say that it is well with my soul if those other things are not taken care of. If we don't have the basic needs, if those aren't met. And by all means, we can fast for a season. And that energizes us in the Lord. There's some great testimonies of POWs and those who've gone without yet are vibrant with the Lord. I don't dismiss any of that at all. But is that God's design for his people? I learned this lesson well when I was in the mission field of Haiti. this mission that I would participate at, the gospel message was clear, it was primary, it was something that everybody needed to hear. They're very direct about that. We need to know God through the person of Jesus Christ. But they also knew that if the food and the drink wasn't supplied, if there wasn't a system for feeding people and for providing sustainable drinking water and decent health care, that quite often the message would fall on deaf ears. So much of the effort there, almost the majority of it, is feeding orphans, digging wells, sourcing water, delivering healthy babies, medical clinics out in the hills. And that's the context in which the gospel was presented. Life in Jesus Christ. Because if we don't have food, if we don't have drink, can it really be well with our soul in a sustainable fashion? Again, God can do anything, but is that his model? No, he cares about the whole sheep, the whole person. And this is the Lord who we worship. This is who we come to praise and glorify. He's the one who cares about us completely and fully. He's also the one who we share. This is our testimony to the world around us. How many people are looking for that all-inclusive experience of life? That cruise ship experience of life. How many people do you know are looking for that Montego Bay experience? It's all right here. Everything I need. Yet you know that there's something missing. You know that there's something they can't get at that tiki bar. They can't get at that restaurant. They can't get because they're sitting out in the sun. All fine things. Is it really all-inclusive? Absolutely not. They've got food, but have they met Jesus, the bread of life? They've got drink, but have they met Jesus, who's living water? They've got rest, they unplug, they put their feet up, they take vacation, but have they met Jesus, who invites us to come to him? And says, no, I will give you rest. Psalm 23, it nourishes our soul. It's a part of our experience, but it's also a part of our witness to the world around us. You say, are you really rested, my friend? You've eaten, but have you been fed? You've drank, but I think you're going to thirst again. We know Jesus, who is the Good Shepherd. He's the full expression of God to us. And then there's us. Why does he have to make us lie down? Why do we resist? Why do we run from the Good Shepherd, even those of us who know who he is? Is there a lack of discernment at times? Is there a lack of seeking him? I'm speaking to myself here, just like, self, why? Why do you have to get sick to actually find rest? Why does that have to happen? And then why do we as Christians complain as much as we do? It's not an in-house thing. It's just broadly speaking. Why do we as Christians complain as much as we do? When David says, the Lord is my shepherd, I lack nothing. In that he's acknowledging that God has provided all that is good and wise and right. And I admit, we live in a broken world and we should be frustrated about things. That's not right. It shouldn't be that way. Indignation, right? Righteous indignation. That's okay. But as a lifestyle of complaining, boy, that damages our witness. And it's hard to glorify God. It's hard to say these words, Lord, you provided everything I need. But I'm guilty of that. I have plenty of days where I say, I feel bad for myself for whatever reason, X, Y, Z. I do well to memorize these verses. Say, Lord, you are my shepherd, I lack nothing. Look at what you do. You make me lie. You make me lie down in green pastures. You bring me to quiet waters. Lord, you restore my soul. when it gets deep, dark, when I'm in the valley, Father, you are with me. Your rod and staff, they comfort me. I'm on my way to the house of the Lord forever. I got to just repeat it to myself over and over until I believe it. And see if there's any room left to complain. Majority of this sermon was written while I was at a car dealership, getting the oil changed. I took the laptop there, and I'm writing in the lounge by myself, quietly for a while. And at some point, people started to congregate in the other section of the lounge, not the same room, but close enough, along with this guy and his dog in tow, this little dog. Very active dog. And I went from just sort of this quiet, serene place and, just praying, thinking through scripture, all of that, just where are we going with this, Lord, to hearing this panting. That's what Gracie does when she sees a dog. She goes, and I hear this, and I look over and there's this gentleman with this tiny little white dog. And the dog's just like, you can tell there's people in there, so he's distracted by the people. And they've got snacks up on the counter. He's distracted by these snacks. He's hearing, he's smelling, there's all these things. He's just back and forth, back and forth. And I could tell the guy loved his dog. Because I'd hear him. Every once in a while I'd hear him. He'd whisper into the dog's ear. Say, be calm. He's petting him. Be calm. Just real gently. And by the time I left, that dog had totally settled down. Alert, paying attention. But he was good. What a great owner this guy was. I said, your dog made it in my sermon. Because he made me think about how God is with his people. He knows what we need. He knows what our distractions are. He's created us. And it's not just mechanical. For God, it's not just transactional. Here's your food, here's your water. No, it's thoughtful. It's with detail. He gets us not just on the outside, but also on the inside. He's all-inclusive. Not like Key Largo. Not like one of those destination places that I like to visit. But I don't leave there saying, okay, that was it. No, we find our all in the Lord. David's mind is very vertical. He's looking at the plate, the food, the water, the refreshing of his soul. But his heart is vertical. He knows the good shepherd.